Well, after those emotional scenes at the airport, we're now joined by Ramraj. He is a South African who was evacuated from Sudan as well, joining us now from Durban. Ash, good morning to you and thanks for your time. Let's begin with the feeling of being home. Just describe what it's like being away from the war in Sudan.
Good morning, Chloe. Good morning, guys. It is hard for me to be back home, back with the family. At one stage we thought we were never going to make it out. We thought we were still going to be stuck in Sudan in my apartment. It was horrific. I must say, I was 2 kilometers from the presidential palace. That was where most of the action was taking place. There was bullets and gunfire all around us, with tanks rolling in. It was horrendous.
Yeah.
And for us getting out safely and, just having a straight, sound mind and being emotionally secure, we managed to get most of the people out and we're back home safe and sound.
Let's talk about what that first day was like, because as you describe it now, you were almost at the heart of this conflict. What was happening?
Okay, so the day started, it was Saturday 2 weeks ago. I was at my office, and at about 9 o'clock, my driver comes running in, and we could see he's panic-stricken. He says, "We got to get out, we got to leave. And I was on a call with one of my colleagues in Juba, South Sudan. And he grabbed my laptop bag and he pushed me out the building into the car in the back seat. He says, "Stay down, stay down." And I said, "What's going on?" He says, "There's war." The thing is, during the past few weeks, I've only been there since the 11th of March, so 5 weeks in. During the past few weeks, there was always protests and tires burning, but nothing as horrendous as what we expected. But this was now a full-blown war. As we get into my apartment, I could see the gunfire, I could hear the gunshots, see smoke everywhere. I got to the apartment ready to cover, and just only to hear rockets flying and bullets, and it was hectic. It was very, 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 very traumatic. And we were scared. I must say, it's coming out of a movie scene. These things you see. And it was really, really hectic, And these guys outside my apartment, I could see them. They used to congregate early in the mornings. I could actually listen to the conversations on the two-way radios and hear the vehicles pulling up and the soldiers jumping off and running around and gunfire all around us.
Sure. Let's talk about the frenzy now, trying to get out of Sudan, perhaps starting with what you have left behind. I've been reading reports about some people saying that I've had to leave my 2 dogs behind. All I had to do is basically just have lots of water and lock them in the house, but with also bags of food so that they can eat as long as they possibly can. What was your situation and perhaps the line of work you in?
Okay, so I work for a company in the automotive sector. My job was for expansion into the country. So it was dealer development, head of dealer development and strategies. So the thing was, when all this happened, to just only pack an emergency case. That's all you can take with you. So I left basically everything behind, clothing, shoes, toiletries, whatever we could just salvage it and leave with us at short notice. Because from us to get out of Khartoum too, where the fighting was heavy, by that stage I had enough of this war, and I said, "We've got to come to a plan with my colleagues that are in the same building. We've got to leave here." And we knew exactly by that stage, by day 5 or 6, we knew exactly when the firing would be heavy or sporadic and which areas they're coming in. So we waited for a gap and we got into the car, and 7 of us with the security managed to get out of there safely to an area called Mujahideen. That's where the AK compound was. And through all of this, I was still in contact with Dr. Suleiman of Gift of the Givers. I actually initiated this whole process with him and with the embassy. The embassy wasn't giving us full communication, unfortunately. They also had communication breakdowns, and we're living on generated power 2 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, just to survive and, just to charge our phone batteries and keep in touch with our families and, the rest of the people to see what's going on. And there was a WhatsApp group with the rest of the South Africans. There was no clear and concise plan. The government said they're going to send in armed troops or send the special forces in to get us. We waited for that. That didn't happen. And then there's a frenzy because the embassy wasn't keeping in touch with us and giving us clear communication. So eventually we had to take this in our own hands. And Dr. Suleiman and myself and the people from the embassy got together and said, "Guys, we need to strategy to get out of here." And on Sunday, I managed to leave my apartment with a few of my colleagues. And we got to the compound. because most of the other expats, the other nationalities gotten out of there safely. The firing there wasn't too bad. So when we got there, we put a plan together to get as many South Africans to this place and make it our central base. And the next morning, leave at about 10 o'clock. Then we get a call on the WhatsApp group from the ambassador to say that they've secured 2 buses coming through from Cairo or from Egypt to pick us up. And after 6 that morning, one of the guys from the embassy called me and said, actually, you need to make a plan because these buses are coming into Khartoum. It's too dangerous.
Yeah.
So we had to frenzy around, and luckily the Kenyan guys didn't have the funds to pay for their buses. It's exorbitant amounts, and the bus company owners wanted US dollars in cash. So I got hold of the embassy. I said, guys, make your way here, bring the cash. This is the amount. We've got the 2 buses secured. And we had to make that treacherous journey out of Khartoum towards the Egyptian border, well, towards the Sudanese border, then into Egypt, which was also, it was an 18-hour bus drive to the worst of terrain. It wasn't the best of buses, and not comfortable. It was very horrendous. And we drove through the Sahara Desert. We got there late at night, spent the night out, and next morning got to the border post where it was just absolute mayhem and chaos.
Before we end the conversation, Ash, as you left Sudan behind, talk to us about some of the locals there. Surely you had started making contact with some of the people there. The kind of situation that you leave behind, how would you describe it?
It's heart-wrenching, seriously. We accommodated a group of women and children in our building, and when a shell came into our building, thank God there was nobody hurt. It actually hit the bottom end of our building, and these people just fled for cover. They fled for cover, and it was so sad to see a 2-year-old child gone white in the face, not to what to expect. Our staff and families, those that could afford to leave Sudan, had left, but unfortunately those that are there, our prayers are with them. Our thoughts are with them. I'm trying to keep in touch with as many as I can. But, in saying this story, once again, our government has let us down. There was no clear strategy. At day 8, they contacted us to ask us where we all are. And they don't have proper communication. Surely the defense attaché would have satellite phones, have the proper equipment, and give the correct information. The first thing you do is locate your citizens, and not like the Americans, they knew exactly where everybody was. So if there's an evacuation plan, they knew what to do. We're just told on a Friday morning, everybody meet in 6th Street, and not sure where, what time, and that was the heart of the firing. And that's a nice step. Nobody leaves, everybody just get to AK compound where it's safer, and make your way and give them sufficient time. And everybody found their way there, and those that we could get out there, I think there were 47 of us with the embassy staff. And the other challenge that we had, which was really, this was surreal. We have an ambassador of the country who is the president's 2IC. In a country like Sudan, they don't respect women. They don't have time for women, and you cannot speak the language. And that was a major breakdown that we had, where the ambassador had no pull. Any country, the ambassador is, like I say, 2IC of the president, and she needs to have allies and different departments to get her citizens out in case of emergency. Again, we reacted too late, and it was just catastrophe. But we are thank God for that.
Yeah. The more I listen to you, Ash, the more I'm getting a sense that you seem to suggest that it was gift of the givers that was more helpful to the South Africans who were trying to evacuate than the government itself. Am I hearing you correctly? And going forward, what would your advice be to government?
Firstly, I must recognize Dr. Suleiman and his team. I was in contact with him. I made the first call to him on day 6 of the war. I said, I need help for these people. And we tried to put a plan in place, but unfortunately with the war going on, there's no aid that can come in until the war stops. With regards to government and going forward, I think that I can actually assist in this because I've been in it. We put a strategy plan in place. When you see tanks rolling into town, you see heavy artillery coming in, surely it must ring bells and say, what is going on? Let's phone the Defense Department and say, guys, are you planning for a war or what's happening? So I can get my citizens up. So, then you have a plan to say, day 1 what happens, day 2 what happens, day 3 what happens. And in this case, it was no communication. People getting frustrated, and especially children. The youngest child we had, I think you saw the interview just now, where it's 1.5 years, and the poor child is traumatized for the rest of his life. And there are other kids there with us that lived on just warm water and soft drinks and a little bit of snacks that we could get for 28, 30 hours. That's all just like dry bread and whatever we could get our hands on.
Yeah. As we conclude the conversation, I hate to ask this question, but the more I listen to you, the more I'm hearing disappointment. Should government be taking credit at all for this evacuation?
Look, they assisted in getting the armed forces there. They got their armored woods there. By then, we'd already gotten through to the border. We made other strategies between Dr. Suleiman, myself, and one of the MC guys. But, our first strategy was get to the nearest airport and get evacuated from there by the SANDF. That didn't work out because the armed forces everywhere. The second strategy was that there were some Tanzanian students that were stuck. And Dr. Suleiman asked me if I could get a bus and get these students to the airport, and we jump on the Air Tanzanian plane and get us to Tanzania. And that couldn't happen because, again, obviously the airport was compromised. And our next best thing was just to jump on buses ourselves, which we had arranged because the ambassador's buses let them down. We arranged the buses and then we got to the border. Like I said, it was treacherous. It was driving through the night. It was, uncharted terrain. It was just terrible. And, people were nervous. People were scared, with no food, no, little bit of water that we could get. We stopped at a roadside place and we just got some food on the roadside just to survive the night. And we went throughout the day where we got to the border post and it was horrendous. I mean, we had no problem. The South African ambassador wasn't even recognized for a status symbol or anything else. So, it was, if government takes credit for the whole thing, then I'm going to be very disappointed because more credit is due to Dr. Suleiman and his team for getting involved and putting us out.
Ash Ramraj, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us. And he's a South African who also had to evacuate Sudan and doesn't have much positive to say about the government. But eventually they were able to take the South Africans via the army personnel that were there, that were dispatched by our government. But clearly, still more work to be done for government in order to respond to these situations.